I remember the exact moment I stopped counting. It was a Tuesday, October 14th. Dinner was on the table at 6:30, same as always. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans with butter. The kind of meal that takes 3 hours. My husband walked in, sat down, picked up his fork, and turned on the TV. No smells good. No thank you. Nothing. And I just stood there at the counter, still holding the oven mitt, thinking, when was the last time anyone in this house even looked at me? But let me take you back to where this all began. I married Daniel when I was 26. He was 30. We met at a work conference in Phoenix. He was funny, he was warm, and on our third date, he told me I was the most capable woman he'd ever met. I believed him. For a long time, I held on to that. We bought a house in Naperville, Illinois, about 18 months after the wedding. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with an island. I remember thinking, this is where I'm going to build something real. I left my job in marketing when our first son, Tyler, was born. That was 2010. We agreed it made sense. Daniel's salary covered us fine, and daycare costs were brutal that year. It was a practical decision. At least, that's how I explained it to myself. What I didn't see then, what I couldn't see, was that the moment I stopped having my own paycheck, something shifted. It was subtle. So subtle I wouldn't have been able to name it for years. Dinner became my responsibility. Then groceries. Then every school form, every doctor's appointment, every birthday gift for every person in Daniel's family. It happened gradually, the way water wears down stone. No single moment you could point to and say, there. That's where it started. By 2013, I was running a household of 4. We had our second son, Marcus, by then, entirely on my own. Daniel worked long hours. I understood that. I told myself I understood that. My neighbor Carol watched me unload the car one afternoon, both boys on my hip, for grocery bags in each hand. She said, honestly, I don't know how you do it all. I laughed it off. Said something like, you just do what needs to be done. But that night, lying in bed, I realized I didn't know how I did it either. And more than that, I realized nobody in my own house had ever asked. That was the first crack. I just didn't know it yet. It started with a birthday cake. Marcus turned 7 in March of 2017. I spent 2 days making a chocolate layer cake from scratch, the kind with the buttercream roses on top. I'd watched 3 YouTube tutorials. I'd driven 40 minutes to a specialty store to get the right food color. The whole kitchen smelled like sugar and chocolate for an entire weekend. We sang happy birthday. Marcus blew out the candles. Everyone ate cake. And then Daniel's mother, Renee, said, Daniel, did you pick this up from that bakery on 5th? Daniel just shrugged and said, "MM. It's good, right?" He didn't correct her. He didn't say a word. I was standing right there, holding the cake knife. And he just let it pass. I probably should have said something right then. But I didn't. I cut the cake and smiled and told myself it was just a small thing. It wasn't a small thing. That moment lived in me. I kept going back to it at night when I couldn't sleep. It wasn't that Renee didn't know, she was just making conversation. It was that Daniel knew. He watched me make that cake. He saw me covered in flour at midnight. And when the moment came to say, actually, my wife made this, he chose silence. I started paying attention after that. Not in an obvious way. Just noticing. I noticed that when Daniel's coworkers came over for dinner, and this happened 4 times that year, he would say things like, we threw together some food. We. As if the beef tenderloin and homemade tiramisu had assembled themselves. I noticed that when his mother called on Sunday afternoons, he would tell her about his week. His meetings, his projects, his stress. And if she asked how things were at home, he'd say good, everything's good, and hand me the phone. I noticed that Tyler, who was 12 by then, had started doing the same thing. Leaving his plate on the table, walking past me without speaking, picking up his father's habits the way kids do, quietly and completely. In December 2017, I added up the dinners. Since 2010, 7 years, roughly 5 nights a week when Daniel was home, I'd made approximately 1,820 dinners. That didn't count lunches. That didn't count the weekend breakfasts. I wrote the number down on a notepad and left it on the kitchen counter. Nobody asked what it meant. And that's when I realized I'd been wrong about everything. In January 2018, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patricia Osei. I found her through my insurance portal, made the appointment myself, drove there myself, paid the $40 copay out of the grocery budget because I didn't want Daniel to see it on the credit card statement and ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. At my second session, Dr. Osei asked me to describe a typical Tuesday. I talked for 45 minutes without stopping. She let me. When I finally ran out of words, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What you're describing has a name. It's called invisible labor. And the invisibility isn't an accident." I didn't fully understand what she meant that day, but I wrote it down. By March, I'd told one person, my college roommate Diane, who lived in Seattle. I called her on a Saturday morning when Daniel had taken the boys to a baseball game. I told her about the birthday cake, about the notepad, about the dinners. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Honey, when's the last time he asked you how your day was?" I opened my mouth to answer, and I couldn't think of one. Not one specific time. Not in years. That silence on the phone, mine, not hers, was worse than anything Daniel had ever done or said, because it meant I'd been living inside that absence so long I'd stopped noticing it was there. By June 2018, the number was 4,380. I'd gone back and counted properly, 7 days a week, accounting for vacations and the weeks Daniel traveled for work. I put it in a spreadsheet. Column A, date range. Column B, meals cooked. Column C, any acknowledgement received. Column C was almost entirely blank. I printed it out, folded it, put it in the back of my recipe binder, behind the index cards my grandmother had written out by hand. And I waited. I don't know what I was waiting for. Some moment where Daniel would look at me, really look, and see what was right in front of him. She had one more thing to tell me. I wasn't ready. It happened on a Sunday in September 2018. Daniel's parents were coming for dinner. I'd been cooking since Friday osso buco, a risotto, 2 desserts. The house was clean. The table was set. 20 minutes before they arrived, Daniel came into the kitchen and said, "Did you do anything special for the centerpiece? My mom likes that kind of thing." I put down the wooden spoon. I turned around. I told him, "I've been cooking for 3 days, Daniel." He looked at me like I'd said something strange. He said, "I know. It looks great." I told him, "Do you know how many dinners I've made since Tyler was born?" He blinked. He said, "What?" I told him, 4,380. I counted. He was quiet for a second. Then he almost smiled. Not a mean smile, a confused one. He said, "Why would you count that?" And there it was. That one question. Why would you count that? Not "I'm sorry I never noticed." Not "That's incredible. I should have said thank you." Just, why would you keep track of something like that? Because it mattered to me, Daniel. Because I was trying to make it matter to someone. His mother arrived 8 minutes later. Dinner was served at 6:30. Everyone said the osso buco was wonderful. Daniel's mother looked at him and said, "You're so lucky she takes such good care of this family." He smiled and said, "I know. I didn't leave that night. I didn't leave that year. What I did was stop. Not all at once. But slowly, over the following months, I started pulling back. I made simpler dinners. I stopped the elaborate weekend breakfasts. I let the birthday cakes come from the bakery. Nobody said a word for 6 weeks. Then one evening Tyler came into the kitchen, looked at the pasta on the stove, and said, Is this all we're having? And I realized he had learned it too. That the food would appear. That the work was invisible. That you could take it and never once say thank you. I went back to work in February 2019. Part-time at first, then full. Daniel and I are still married. Some things have shifted. Not enough. But some. The thing I never said, the thing I couldn't say that Sunday in the kitchen, is that I didn't count those dinners out of resentment. I counted them because I needed proof. Proof that my days had added up to something. Proof that I had been here, in this house, doing this work, all those years. Nobody gave me that proof. So I made it myself. When no one sees your work, you start to wonder if you're really there at all. And the most painful kind of loneliness isn't being alone. It's being invisible to the people sitting right across from you at dinner.